Before we get started with this video, I'd like to first thank my patrons over on patreon.com/Toogie24 for helping make this video possible. If you want to get involved in the process and decide what videos we make next, check us out over on patreon.com, again, /Toogie24. While I'm sitting here talking about other things to promote, you can also check out my second channel at TWOGIE24, Toogie24, and the Toogie's Take podcast, which you can watch right here on YouTube. Just search the podcast name, or of course you can listen to it wherever podcasts can be found, the likes of Apple, Google, Spotify, and anywhere you can think of. Welcome back to the Cold War. I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for me to say that for a long time. This is the series where we take a look back at and directly compare the EA NHL and NHL 2K franchises. Now make sure to check out the first episode. It was uploaded a while ago. If you haven't already, you may want to avoid spoilers when it comes to our win tally in this head-to-head series. With that said, in this video, we're going to take a look back at the second battle to take place on the virtual ice between these two franchises. NHL 2001 gave EA the 1-0 advantage so far, but today, it's NHL 2002 versus NHL 2K2. Mario Lemieux, fresh off of coming out of retirement, versus Chris Drury. I mean, he was fresh off of a Stanley Cup win with Colorado and one of my favorite players of all time, but what a choice for a cover boy. A quick reminder as well before we get into this of what we look for in this series. Not only are we comparing the games to one another, but we're also looking at what they do well that we might not see in the modern EA NHL titles. Because spoiler alert, 2K waved the white flag a long time ago. We compare each game in 5 different categories: presentation, gameplay, franchise mode, other modes, and year-to-year improvement. Now, both games were met with a positive reception at the time, but how did they hold up? How did they compare directly? It's time to find out. Category number 1, presentation. Within presentation, we're looking at everything that the word could encompass: graphics, music, menu design, the in-game graphics, etc. NHL 2002 features maybe the most streamlined menu you'll ever see, a wonderful selection of jerseys, which I will say, in the voting here for me, will always be a huge plus. It helps older games age so well when you can actually use jerseys that still aren't available in modern titles due to what I presume would be licensing issues. 2002 once again sees EA with actual licensed music, and while the soundtrack isn't expansive, they'll always get bonus points for featuring the likes of Gob and Sum 41. The in-game presentation as well is still solid. It still holds up to this day. 02 saw the addition of further between-play cutscenes where player models still hold up, to the addition as well of the game story feature that would highlight the star player of the match more often than not a team's goaltender for their brick wall-like performances. And then we look at 2K2, which struggles in the presentation department pretty much right out of the gates. I mean, come on, look at this menu. Along with the lack of a soundtrack and super repetitive commentary, the only place where 2K gets a leg up on the competition here is with full player intros and anthems before the puck drop, a nice touch that's sorely missed in modern titles. However, it's not enough. Hands down, our first category goes to EA NHL 2002. Next up, gameplay. Now, I mentioned game story a few moments ago when talking about NHL 2002. The game story feature would be influenced as well by the new emotion meter. Shots, goals, hits, big saves, all of it would factor into a visual representation of who had the in-game momentum. And part of me still thinks it's the issue as to why people are so convinced that ice tilt exists in modern games, among other reasons. It's worth mentioning as well, these were still the glory days of seeing big hitters with the hammer next to their names, or snipers with the target, something it feels like EA has tried to recreate with the addition of superstar abilities in NHL 22. This was also the year where we saw the addition of the breakaway cam, where everything would slow down once you had a clean shot at the opposing goaltender. Between that, big hits, save replays, player stat lines, a full 3-star of the game presentation, you really do feel like you're getting a complete hockey experience. The only real negative I can find with the gameplay, the fighting sucks, although it is hilarious. Gameplay in 2K2 is largely the same from the previous edition. While there is a dedicated deflection button, which I'd love in modern titles, it's almost impossible to use unless you're on couch co-op. Where it does shine above 2002, in-game strategies. These are very similar to what we see in the modern titles, if not more expansive. It was very surprising to see this feature in-game as far back as this. And I have to say, the strategies are effective as well. I never got the feeling of the AI ignoring what I was asking them to do. Aside from a much better fighting system than its EA counterpart, there simply wasn't much innovation or improvements with the gameplay though. And for that reason, I have to give EA the nod in this category as well. Now, unfortunately for both games, we're still in the era of there being no such thing as franchise mode, but we are getting closer to said era, and it will be hotly contested, I promise. So stay tuned for that, but for now, it's a draw. We move on to our penultimate category, other modes and features. Now, neither game featured any new modes. NHL 2002 still has Play Now, Season, Playoffs, Shootout, and Tournament mode, while 2K2 has everything I just mentioned except for Shootout mode. Now, for that reason, you could give it to EA, but there is more to discuss. 2K2's last big haymaker is their Superior Creation Zone, featuring different goalie styles, as well as attributes that we still don't see in the modern EA titles, including biases and shot tendencies, checking tendencies, something I've begged for, absolutely begged for. So that's a huge boost to 2K's chances in this category. However, EA strikes back with a very interesting new feature, cards. No, we're not talking about Ultimate Team, thankfully. We don't have to do that at all in this timeline. But the cards feature for NHL 2002 was more of a pure version of the concept. You could earn points by completing in-game tasks, such as scoring on a breakaway. You could then use those points to open a pack. Packs would feature bronze, silver, or gold versions of each player card in the game, and each rarity would boost a player to hero status for either 1 or 2 periods, if not the full game. Hero status being a boost in attributes. For those who do not know, it makes your player better. As well as player cards, you could also unlock celebrations that could be assigned to each button. It is worth noting that both games had custom celebrations, but EA's implementation was far superior. You could also unlock Easter eggs, such as Big Head Mode, as I'm sure you've noticed, or changing the pitch of the commentary team's voices. It's not the deepest feature in the world, but it did provide a lot of replayability, and for that reason, I give EA the edge here as well. And last but not least, we've arrived at the last section of this head-to-head comparison, the year-to-year improvements, and I think you know where this is going. 2K2 is a solid hockey game. They certainly made improvements upon their first release, but that's the key. This was still the building phase for the franchise, whereas EA already had their foundation set, and it allowed them to push forward with that extra polish that really puts the momentum in their favor. You could ask whether or not it's fair to compare the two for that reason, and maybe it isn't. But if you've watched my content before, you'll know 2K isn't that far off from really making this a close contest. But this category also goes to NHL 2002. And with that, it's official. It's another victory in the books for EA. The head start has really paid off, but at the same time, their desire to innovate is still clearly evident. Up next is NHL 2003 versus NHL 2K3, and perhaps this is where the gap will start to close. As so far, both EA games I've reviewed have been on the big two consoles. 2001 was reviewed on the PS2, 2002 on the original Xbox, whereas both 2K games were exclusive to the Sega Dreamcast. But starting with the next episode, both titles are on the big consoles, and 2K3 has a couple of big surprises in store. Thank you guys for watching the video. I truly do appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, there's plenty more to check out on this channel. And as mentioned, again, there's my gameplay channel, Tukey24, where you can find my NHL 22 franchise modes, among numerous other games. There's also the Tukey's Take podcast, as I mentioned, again, wherever podcasts can be heard, or on the podcast YouTube channel if you want to watch it in video form. Thank you guys again. Looking forward to seeing what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.